28th. If we could all rise for the pledge. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can I please have roll call?
Barbara Garcia,
Here.
Brandau,
Here.
Isich here, Morris,
Here.
Nichols. Here. Sadoo,
Here.
White.
Here. Before we get started, this is a special meeting, but we do still have a place for public comment. If you're here for public comment, I just ask that you fill out one of the cards. You still have the same 3 minutes. For board members, I think maybe this is the first meeting that we've had that has been off schedule, but just in case I'm missing something. When we do have a special meeting or something that's off schedule, we're required to, however you wanna look at it, maybe not required, but if we can have our minutes from the previous meeting all ready to go, that is the one thing that we do approve at these special meetings. So you would note in your number 4 in consent agenda, we do have the November 2023 minutes.
I move that the Board of Education approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second.
Were there any questions or corrections on those? Can I please have roll call?
Barbara Garcia, Yes. Brandau,
Yes.
Isich, yes, Morris,
Yes.
Nichols. Yes. Sadoo,
Yes.
White.
Yes, motion carries. At this time, we will move to 5, which is public comment. All right, thank you. And we will move to 6, which is the discussion item, which is our superintendent search next steps. We have talked in brief at several meetings. I also sent some information by email about how we might choose to move forward in looking at the schedule and looking at the holidays ahead and the timing of where our break falls. I felt it was necessary to get back together to at least be able to give a first step direction. We can at this time have a discussion about whether we want to take the step to post internally, which we do have time for, which would allow that posting to go up and come down before our next board meeting. It would also then allow us at our next board meeting to review any internal candidates, any interview process from there that would include, and then be able to pivot, make a decision from there. So again, if applications come in and they do request those applications to be held in confidence, that can happen. We can review those in closed session. We cannot discuss them, but we can look at applications for the merit of if they fit the criteria we're looking for and if we would like to interview. The moment that we decide we're going to interview a candidate, whether it be internal or otherwise, then those names would become public. Everything else from there will be a public process. Does that make sense to everyone? Any questions about that? Did I miss anything, Daryl?
No.
Okay. Again, I just need some feedback. If it's something where we do wanna consider posting internally, I would need a motion on that to then give Daryl the direction ahead to be able to post that. He can then tell us what that will entail, his suggested timeline going forward. We can ask questions on that. If that is not the direction we're choosing, or we wanna have another conversation, we can do that at this time.
May I make a motion?
Sure.
I move that the board move to conduct an internal search for a superintendent candidate.
Is there someone that's willing to second?
I would second.
Right, if at this point in time, we can have further discussion about that before we do take roll call. Jennifer?
So I would like to have a little discussion. I know that the 3 of you had met just regarding what our options were moving forward. And I know at the board meeting, you kind of said we would have more information. You did send some things in email, but could you discuss a little bit more kind of what the 3 of you talked about as far as our options?
Everything that we talked about was included there. It was a very informal meeting. It was not set up as a meeting per se. It was set up as, okay, based on Tim and I being senior board members, Brittany and her experience, what information that can we gather together to provide all board members that they could at least look at, see what's going on out there, what conversations can we have with them. As we have talked about in other meetings, and I can't remember, I think I sent it in an email as well some time ago. As a board and based on our policy, we have the ability to do several things. We can strictly appoint somebody. We can do a targeted search. We can do internal searches. We can do external searches. Our goal was really just to say, okay, if we're looking at these pieces, do we have internal candidates? You know, do we wanna post internally to see if we have internal candidates before we go outside? Because that can also change what a search looks like long-term. We then put together, Daryl assisted me in gathering information, which was really the bulk of what happened after that, which was from that conversation, you got the same information that I got. Daryl and I had a conversation, which was, okay, can we scope out, you know, really the two main search firms being in the state of Michigan, being MASB and MLI. He contacted them and talked to them about searches that were happening now, pulled together the information on current searches that we are aware of, that are both ongoing, and some discussion, I think, about ones that were going to be posted or in the process of doing that. So that information is all what was given to you. They did, in that process, also provide what would have normally been like request for pricing information, which is not something that we asked for, but naturally, based on Daryl's questions, they did provide that information, which is why that was also sent to you. The two of you are welcome to fill in if I missed something.
Only other thing I would add is that we also discussed like the criteria that were used previously to search for the superintendent before, and you know, discussing a little bit about like, you know, we read through those criteria and looked over those, and we're trying to think about, does this still apply? Are there other things we would think about adding, that sort of a thing? So there was a discussion about criteria as well. And so that's something that I know we were talking about a little bit. Yeah,
And
I guess
that
we had that
information-
conversation.
And that
Same thing you were
information
saying.
was sent to you as well in full
Yeah.
with nothing else being changed.
So the criteria would be the same kind of that we were looking for last time, there wasn't anything specific that we wanted to add?
I think that if we are going to post it, I think that Daryl would, I think that he would work off of that same posting that we used last time. And then if there's obviously any tweaks to language,
I've seen some things that probably need a little adjusting. You know, it talks about rapidly growing, or we might need to temper that a little bit to hoping to grow a little faster. Just some other things like that, but yeah, I would use the same criteria, because if we used MLI, it would probably be pretty close to the same thing they put out again, so yeah.
And we also talked about how at this meeting or any other meeting, the board members could, you know, suggest additional amendments to that, you know, not amendments, that's not the right way to say it. Other things that we might wanna add or change, so.
Well, and I think you could add those to the interview questions if you went that route as well. That might give you more direction if you ask those directly.
very true.
Yeah, I wouldn't change much, other than what Daryl mentioned. It's kind of a starting point to build forward with, and I'm sure we will have questions for the candidates that we do decide to interview.
I think that, I mean, I think for all of us, and I think with the three of us certainly agreed, and I don't perceive that probably any of the rest of you would be in any different situation. We are certainly a big enough district that I would not necessarily consider this district a first go as a superintendent. So, you know, I think one of the biggest pieces that we talked about was, you know, we're still looking for somebody that does have proven successful superintendent experience, or has served in a large district or for a period of time as an assistant type role within the central office staff. So that would be, I mean, you know, I mean that keeps your bar at a certain spot, if you will, as far as going from there, but there was nothing, I mean, a bulk of what came out of that discussion was really dumping on Daryl and asking Daryl to say, hey, can you pull a bunch of info for me here? Which he graciously did, so I appreciate that, and thank you, Daryl. Anybody else questions?
I just want to reiterate concerns that I have on going internal first. I feel I'd rather have all of the information possible, which is internal and external candidates, to see what the whole pool might look like, rather than start with internal. And maybe education is a bit different, but in the public sector, I know I've been through cases where when there are higher level postings, management, director, etc., and internal people then apply and don't get it, right? Now they're essentially, oh, I tried for this position and somebody else is gonna be my boss, and they leave because there's a bad taste and all of that. So I guess I'm just a little concerned that, you know, we go this internal route and somebody doesn't check all of the boxes or whatever, and we decide, okay, now we need to go someplace else, and we go external. One of two things then would happen. Maybe we find somebody that does check all of the boxes and great, hey, yay, everything worked. Or we find somebody that didn't check all of the boxes. Do we go back to the internal and go, yeah, well, you know, we didn't find anything else out there, and how does that make the internal candidate now feel? So that's my concerns, and I honestly would rather post it all, external and internal together, and, you know, see what our entire pool of candidates may be.
I appreciate that, thank you. And I certainly think that there is no 100% right answer in this. I mean, I think there's certainly are, you know, things that can be pros or cons, looking at it both ways, for sure. I do think that education is probably a little different in my experience in going through this 2 different times. That we do tend to have more targeted, there's fewer targets out there, you know, I mean, as far as that goes. And I do think that if you not eliminate, but if you look at internal candidates first, that definitely gives you a different feel for what your external post is, because there definitely changes, there seems to change the discussions that go on out there as far as people knowing who's applying, who's not. People do not want their names brought up. It can be very testy in other school districts. If somebody's working, and let's be honest, you want somebody who's working and busy. So, you know, I mean, certainly there could be reasons why somebody isn't, but I mean, obviously, if somebody's leaving a district, nobody wants to put their name out there and have their confidence shaken within that district either. So I can appreciate what you're saying, and I feel a little bit differently about it based on the fact that I've been through it twice before. I don't know if Tim or Brittany, if you have anything to share, or anybody else have thoughts?
Well, I can share about the experience. I've hired probably 70, 80 people in my 10 years as a business owner. And this is one of the most intense, hard experiences that I'm sure it made all of us better, but it is intense. And if we're happy with a candidate that comes internally, we can forego that burden. So that's my 2 cents on that.
And I think it's important to know that we are looking at, you know, we look at a set of criteria, and at that point in time, when you're looking at checking boxes on criteria, you're checking boxes on criteria. It doesn't become well, I feel better about this person, or I feel better about that person, or, you know, I mean, there's certain things in this process that we do have to, you know, leave out. I don't know how else to say it other than that. Is that a fair?
Yeah, I think that one of the things, and part of why I mentioned like looking at that, like the candidate profile, right, those criteria that are there, like there's a lot of strong criteria there, right? Like, so I think to me, in order to find a candidate who meets this, is somebody who is then like the right person for the job, if they have, you know, the majority of these things. So, and I think for me, with some hiring experience as well, I think sometimes in my experience, and I can't speak for everything, but I think sometimes it can become, when you have like not that it's not great to have a pool of candidates to look for, it is, but sometimes if people are seeming to check off all the boxes, what you seem to be left with sometimes is then like a little bit of a popularity contest, like who liked who best kind of a thing. Which hopefully you're still coming back to the criteria, right? Because that's what we agree on. And I, like I said, be happy to have a discussion about the criteria too. Because I think that's important as a board that we agree, these are the things we're looking for, right? So, but But to me, I think that it does help when thinking about like an individual candidate as compared to these criteria that we agree are important to us as a board and who we're looking for as our next leader. Sorry, I just realized I wasn't next to the mic enough that whole time. My bad. Sorry.
Well, and I mean, just in my experience in interviewing, hiring and everything in my roles, the candidate that checks every box or fulfills every criteria is pretty rare.
Yeah.
You're usually talking about trade-offs between candidates, right? Well, this one has these sets of skills, this one has these sets of skills.
Yeah.
This one has these interpersonal characteristics and might mesh with the team in this way versus this one, was maybe, had a little different personality, right? So you're always talking about trade-offs and whatnot when comparing. And I still feel like going internal only first just sort of limits the ability to kind of compare those things unless somebody emerges that literally fits all of the criteria and is perfect.
Yeah.
And then in which case that's the best case scenario and there's no argument.
Yeah.
It's just been rare in my experience to find somebody that fulfills all of the criteria in that way. So that's where my concerns are. And then I think there's a little bit of risk if we do an internal only and we find one applicant and we decide we hire that one applicant, there might be that perception of, oh, well, they just should have appointed, or they were gonna go this route all along, or the good old boys network of whatever, right? Like that little bit of, and we've heard it on occasion with even internal promotions to building administrators and those kinds of things. We hear some of that. So that's part of my concern as well. If we go internal, it just seems like we have some pitfalls to think about.
I can say I would never, I don't think, be a fan of appointing without at least going through a process of a public interview, being able to ask those questions, put somebody in front of everybody, and hearing back in that way. So that would never, I shouldn't say never because never seems bad, but I don't see myself ever favoring going down that road. So I mean, this for me is that in between of it's a step. It's the first step for me. So I am okay with going that way. I don't know. I mean, certainly, anything, did you have something else to share?
No, I was just gonna ask a clarifying question.
Oh.
If we were to post internally and externally at the same time, does that require the use of a search firm? Like, is there any other way to post externally without a search firm?
You're not gonna have the pool of candidates if it's just me. These individuals are former superintendents. They have their pools of people that they know and work within, so
There's definitely a
I
networking.
would advise you
in this.
not to ask me to do that, to be honest, so.
Yeah, I don't
Why I
think,
called it a clarifying question.
Yeah. It's a good
I
question.
didn't know the answer. It's different in every
Yes.
sector, and I figured it would be different in this one too.
Yes,
and-
no,
You mean we don't just put it on LinkedIn and get
pull up there
everybody
whenever
to-
you think.
I can apply.
John, did you have any thoughts or questions that,
No, not really.
okay, all right. Jennifer?
So I guess I'm just gonna point out the elephant in the room, which is that we have, right now an excellent interim superintendent that we unanimously all voted for this position that I think we would all be interested in having a discussion about either appointing or offering an interview. He would certainly check all of the criteria as far as experience, and based on his experience even here in Caledonia, has a lot of the background knowledge that we need, given some complicated bond things that we have going on, big projects. It would be an asset to this board to have a leader who already understands where we are in the middle of some of these big things, and not have to really divert a bunch of time and energy to an external pool. I've done a bit of hiring myself, and you can definitely come across some great candidates, but what are the odds we're going to find somebody who has checks all those boxes for as far as the candidate criteria, and then also interpersonally, is gonna mesh well with not only this board, but our admin staff who we value so greatly. So I think that while I understand you not being super excited about just appointing somebody, I think that it would be a poor decision not to consider that. Has anyone, maybe, sorry that you're sitting beside me, asked if this is a consideration that maybe Dirk would want to interview for or consider an appointment to that role?
I think that if I may, if you're okay, if I may, I think that given the fact that he took an appointment as an interim and has been serving as an interim, kind of, filling in the needs and getting people to where they need to be, following a successful run as a superintendent, I will say. And that has, other commitments at this time. Certainly, he is considered a staff here, so by choosing to post internally, he certainly does have the right to do that. So that does allow him that opportunity. And I think that probably we'd be best served to, take a vote on the motion, follow that way, and then follow the process and let it play out that way. That would be my suggestion, as a board member in this role, so I don't know if anybody else has thoughts.
I'm good with the internal posting first.
Ready for the question?
Okay, all right, well, why don't you've made a motion, you've made a second, can we go ahead and take roll call then?
Garcia,
Yes.
Randall,
Yes.
Isich, yes, Morris,
Yes.
Nichols,
Yes.
Sadu,
No.
White.
Yes. Motion carries. So before we would even consider adjourning, I guess I'd like to just have a brief conversation or let Mr. Kingsbury kind of work through us here with this. Maybe what this would look like, as far as, I know that you and I briefly talked about a time frame if we were going to internal post, when that would need to end by, so that we could have that information to discuss at our December 11th meeting. So if you can share with us maybe your thoughts and where you're at in that time frame.
Sure, Sure, my first thought is that working back from our next board meeting, which is December 11th, we kind of use that as our starting point, working backwards. So if we put the posting out in the next couple days, then I think it would give us time for that individuals that do apply for the position to gather resumes and work on a cover letter and just put those documents together for review for the board. So if we had those by December 8th, I would have them just delivered to me as opposed to going through an electronic, system that we have, because we probably won't have a ton of individuals internally apply, and then that way I can gather them, create copies and duplicates for the board's review at the next board meeting, which would be December 11th. So that is my initial thought, unless there are any things that might be missing that you'd like me to consider.
I don't think so. I think that if we do have applicants to consider, then assuming, depending on how they're requested, if they're requested in closed session to be as far as considered as a viable applicant for an interview, then I'm hoping that you will plan to stay in case we do have questions of you during that process.
Yes.
Okay,
Sorry, yes.
all right, just wanted to make sure. Any questions that any of you would like to ask of Daryl at this time?
I just want to throw one thing out there
Sure.
too. What if for some reason there is only one applicant? How does that change the board's idea of moving forward? Where you wouldn't necessarily need to review that and per se if you wanted to go straight to interview, I'm just throwing that idea out there in case that was something that did occur.
I think that whatever applicant you receive,
Mhm.
or applications you receive for that, whether it's one applicant or multiple, I would think that, again, all we can review in closed session if requested would be the merits of that. So at that point in time, it still becomes a open meeting
that review.
discussion as far as reviewing that and what our next steps would be, whether that would become, turning around, setting up an interview.
Sure.
Whether that is instructing that we're gonna go a different direction. So, I mean,
Sounds good.
unless somebody else has something to add to that,
I'm good with that.
okay? Everybody okay with that? All right, okay, then I think we're good. You have any more questions of us?
No, I think when I would send this out district-wide through our district email, put a little explanation, I think would be important of what's
Yeah.
going on, maybe a summary of some of the discussion we have there.
Sure.
That sounds.
Yeah.
Just keep transparency.
Yeah,
with everyone.
Absolutely. All right, I'm good with that. All right, I just need a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second,
Second.
all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you, everyone.